Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Native on this special Sunday, November 3rd. I am John Kane, and let's just say this program will not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment. We do encourage and in some cases start conversations, but we don't do prayers and we don't do buffalo speeches. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity. And we do step on a few toes along the way oftentimes. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking into all that is heaped upon us, and we do it all right here from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind people that our audio streams live at www.letstalknative.com. That's our website. We stream video of the show on our Facebook group page or pages via Facebook Live. Our shows are available as podcasts on your favorite podcast platform after our live broadcast. And we take the video and we put it up on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I encourage people to subscribe to our podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel because we put special pieces up on the YouTube channel, not just video of the show, but short form videos and some sometimes other nuggets. We'll just put it that way. I'm John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer, and I'm usually assisted in studio by Jake Proud, but Jake is out sick tonight, so I'm trying to do it all myself here. So bear with me if I hit a few wrong buttons or don't quite get something down quite right. I haven't been doing this on my own for a while, so this is a little bit new to me. All right, let me get right into it. So last week, our last show, which I think is a very good show, and if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. I spent a great deal of time explaining what genocide was and where the word comes from, and of course why it applies to us. But one of the things that we battle with all the time is definitions like for genocide, but also things like racism and white privilege. And, this white privilege thing is something that white people enjoy it, but man, do they want to be in denial about it. So I want to talk a little bit about white privilege, and it does tie back to our last show, talking about the definitions of genocide and such. Because for one thing, if you can get over the obstacle and stop denying that white privilege exists, the question is, where does it come from? Well, and that's pretty simple. I mean, the bottom line is white privilege was written for white people. In all of the foundational documents, not just of the United States, but many of the European countries and, of course, all the colonies. So if you look at the documents, if you look at every doctrine, every practice, every, law, declaration, all of these things that have been done, even the more modern ones. I'm not just talking about the papal bulls. Clearly, the papal bulls, come out of a time where the white people of Europe took over Christianity, essentially. I mean, they turned Jesus into a white guy. And of course, he's a white guy because you've seen all the drawings. so you know that it's white baby Jesus, and of course even the apostles. Does anybody ever notice that the names of the apostles sound like just regular white guy names? I mean, Matt, Simon, John, Andrew, Bartholomew, Bart, James, Phillips, Thomas. The only one that doesn't sound like somebody is Judas. Nobody calls their kids Judas, but even those names, how did they get so white sounding? For one thing, they translate this stuff and so the names, they change over time, right? So you think about how Europe whitened Christianity and then claimed it as their religion, their state religion, their I don't know, racial religion. I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. But all of the papal bulls, all of the decrees that came from the Pope, and of course, at the time when these papal bulls come down, there is only essentially one church, the Catholic Church. They haven't been separated yet. They don't have Protestants yet, right? So all of these papal bulls are really geared towards advancing white people. Of course, advancing Christians, but again, although they aren't, Christian isn't a euphemism for white. They become pretty interchangeable. And I know, some scholars on the subject don't like to turn the doctrine of discovery into a racial decree, but it certainly is. So, and look, as we talk about American history, there's still probably plenty of people who want to reject the notion that the United States and the colonies that preceded it had their foundation in these church documents. Okay, so even if you don't accept that as truth, even though it's truth, let's look at the documents that are the foundational documents of the United States. The Declaration of Independence. I mean, come on. Declaration of Independence. There is, that they are talking about white people. I'll pull it up here. So when they say we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, they aren't talking about people of color. They aren't talking about black people. And they sure as hell aren't talking about native people. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Hell no. Only white people can pursue happiness. So even as they're talking about all men, they still only, and of course, if you're going to get into the gender thing, look, we could argue, okay, but they mean mankind. But, well, whatever. It still says men. So that all men are created equal. Everybody else, no, you're not even close. When you go through this stuff, you realize that it's absolutely geared towards only towards white people. And in fact, later on in the Declaration of Independence, they refer to Native people as just merciless Indian savages. That we are merely tools of Great Britain. Now, of course, their mother country. Those are men. Those are men and created equal. But they talk about just, and where justice comes in. So there's no question that one of the key foundational, much raved about documents, the Declaration of Independence, was not talking about all men or all people. They were talking about white men, and there's very little doubt about it, because that's what they were dealing with, or that's who they were trying to protect. U.S. Constitution, same thing. We the people. They don't mean everybody. The language is clear there that black people are being treated a certain way, and Native people are being, aren't even a part of this thing. But when you look at all the language, it's all geared towards white people. There's nobody, or white men. There's nobody else talked about in there. So so you ask the question, well, where does white privilege come from? It comes from the very documents that create the country, for crying out loud. So there's no question about that, where it comes from. And of course, it is sustained. You move on to the Bill of Rights. When people talk about the First Amendment, and of course they always make it sound, the founding fathers, they thought so much about separation of church and state. Why do you think that was? So freedom of religion. Do you think when the founding fathers of the United States were talking about freedom of religion, you think they were talking about native religion? Hell no. Do you think they were talking about Judaism? Of course not. Islam? No, they're talking about Christian religions, because by then there was already tensions amongst the Christians, because they obviously can't get along. So when they're talking about freedom of religion, they just mean freedom to choose what kind of Christian you're going to be. They weren't saying freedom. They weren't even really saying freedom from religion. So to be clear, again, this is about white people, white people's religion, Protestants, Baptists, Lutherans, Mormons that would come later, I guess, but Moravians, this is all about white people, the Puritans, the Dutch, all of this stuff. No, this is about white people, white people's religion, freedom for white people to choose which religion they follow. No, they weren't going to acknowledge. Hell, and I have problems with these kind of laws, but it wouldn't be until like 1978 that the United States would pass a law that was called the Religious Freedom Act, that where Native people could practice, could legally, as far as the United States was concerned, practice their own belief systems. I don't even like calling our culture a religion. But the problem is, if we did a festival that somebody else could look at and say, oh, that's a religious thing, they literally would not just arrest people, but kill people for doing stuff like that. So no, none of that freedom of religion stuff was about religion or any kind of belief systems for anything other than for white people. And like I said, even Jews weren't really considered white yet. So this was about Christianity, and and all of it. The right to assemble, they meant white people to assemble. They were talking about the whole idea of the reservation system was they weren't trying to assemble us. They were trying to confine us. So and look, and these are the foundational documents of the United States. So there's no question where white privilege comes from. Okay, now we move on, and we'll even get to some of what I talked about on the last show. When after the wars that came out of Europe, both World War I and World War II, there became a real effort to talk about things like human rights. But again, they're still talking about white people, folks. So when they put these conventions together, when denationalization was being talked about, they weren't talking about Africa. No, they were talking about these smaller countries of Europe that were being swallowed up by other, so these smaller groups of white people being swallowed up by other groups of white people. Something they had been doing for centuries, thousands of years among white people. They've been wiping out each other's cultures and jamming them together and creating, kind of remnants of other cultures. That's how they become Christians in the first place. They didn't. No European religions survived. So they had to appropriate one from, turn Jesus white, turn all these apostles into, John, Bart, and James. Bart, one of the Simpsons. Jeez, go figure. So, I mean, again, so when you really break some of this stuff down, you realize that it's all about white people. So when these documents, when these things like denationalization, and then ultimately coming in when I talk about Raphael Lemkin developing the word genocide, it doesn't matter how much when you look at the definition of genocide or anything that was written about the word when it was a foundational idea. So back in the 1940s, it doesn't matter how much it seems like they might have been talking about us. They weren't. They weren't talking about us. So all of this stuff about trying to turn denationalization, the idea of stripping away somebody's national character into a war crime, they weren't talking about what you could still do it to black people and Native people. You're just going to do it to white people. Damn it, they were going to protect each other. All white people are created equal. They have the right to choose certain things, and other white people can't tell white people what to do. Of course, within their hierarchies they can, but not as peoples, right? Not as groups of white peoples. They're all supposed to get along. They were all related after all, more closely. But they sure weren't talking about people of color. They weren't talking about Asia or Africa, or our continent. No, they weren't talking about us. I mean, even when there was became this idea of decolonization was an effort through the United Nations, they still weren't really. They were talking about some peoples of color, but they sure as hell weren't talking about us. In fact, in the midst of having conversations about decolonization, the United States steals Hawaii, for crying out loud. While conversations are going on about decolonization, the United States not only has gone in with their own imperialism to steal land and to illegally occupy places like Hawaii, but in the midst of those, they turn it into a state, or try to. Whether it's legal or not is a whole other issue. So no, even a lot of the UN stuff, it all sounds good on paper. But it was never meant for us. Now, here's where it gets problematic. Because even when you go back into things like the U.S. Constitution, you get to a place and they have to somehow, how do you reconcile the fact that, no, they weren't talking about people of color? You almost got to back it in, right? Look, slavery's wrong because we actually said, we wrote these words and we built a country on these words. So we kind of got to get rid of slavery. Yeah, how'd that go over in the South? So all of this stuff, see, they write these words, they mean it for white people, and then they got to try to pretend, oh no, we didn't mean just white people. Yeah, but how are other people living? I mean, so you can't, you did codify white privilege, but now you got to back away from the white privilege. And so now everybody wants to pretend, oh no, white privilege doesn't exist. I'm white and I don't have any special treatment. Like hell you don't. I mean, it's such an absurd thing. If you're a person of color and you hear any white person say that they don't enjoy white privilege, I mean, it's like, oh, come on, be serious. I mean, the country was built, all of these documents was all about white people. I mean, when I quote some of what L. Frank Baum said in his genocide editorials, he talks about the white race, being the lords and the masters of the Western Hemisphere. So he wasn't talking about Americans. L. Frank Baum wasn't talking about Americans. He said, no, white people. Because you got to be careful when you're using words, because you know what? At one point, at some time in history, white people were calling Native people Americans. Because they didn't really want to call themselves Americans until the whole War of Independence thing came around. Then they wanted to try to separate themselves from the monarchy of, the European monarchies. But no, again, so when you talk about things like white privilege, you have to understand where it comes from and why it's sustained. Because even as many people can say, wait a second, you got language in there that says that people are supposed to be equal. I mean, women can't. I mean, even white women haven't been able to pull that one off, let alone people of color or women of color. So anytime I hear somebody say, "Oh no, I don't have any white privilege," the hell you don't. I mean, and it is so clear if you look at it historically. I mean, you can find president after president after president making a reference to white superiority. No, I mean, they were all white supremacists. Teddy Roosevelt, absolute white supremacist. Then they go and they carve his face on, steal a bunch of land from the Lakota, wipe out a mountain that they already had named for their own grandfathers, and then carve 4 white faces on there. And every one of them were genocidal maniacs. Every one of them, by any standard, should have been viewed as a war criminal. And of course, they didn't have those charges. But I'll tell you, by the time you get into 1913, when we're talking about denationalization being considered a war crime, and genocide being defined and being called a war crime, coming out of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, and that's 1946. The United States is still doing the very things that genocide includes, like ripping kids out of homes and stripping away their culture, stripping away their language, beating them, abusing them, sterilization. All of that stuff was still happening. The only thing that wasn't happening in a wholesale manner was the slaughter of Native people. But killing people is only one of 5 examples of genocide. Killing is only one of them. I mean, causing bodily or mental, psychological harm is one of them. And geez, our people are still going through that. I mean, you look at the current president of the United States. I mean, some of the racist comments that he had. I mean, the whole idea of his thing with trying to use the name Pocahontas as a insult for Elizabeth Warren. I mean, all that stuff is blatantly racist. And racism is a social crime. I mean, and it's one of those things that is intended to impose psychological damage on people. So, that stuff still continues. But again, one of the things that becomes a problem for these people who create these documents, like the Constitution, like the Declaration of Independence, like the definition of genocide. You may have written all that stuff just for white people, but we can read. We can read what you wrote. And what you wrote and what you did were 2 different things. and then when we hear people say, yeah, but, it was different times back then. Look, there was never a time that a black person wanted to be a slave. There was never a right time for slavery. I mean, it existed, and it was popular amongst white people. There was never a good time to have the top of your head cut off and turned in for, as a scalp for bounties. There was never a good time for that. There was never a good time to have a woman's breast cut off so they could make pouches out of the breast, or a man's scrotum to be sliced off so they could make a pouch. That was never a good time for Native people. So anytime somebody says, well, Columbus was a man of his time, or Custer, or Sheridan, or Washington, or Jefferson, no, they were all scumbags. Some of the disgusting things that these people were involved in. Thomas Jefferson, considered one of the most enlightened presidents, especially of the founding fathers. This is a guy who absolutely conned people and say, hey, look, we should be nice to the Native people. We really can't kill them anymore unless they do something. Then we can kill them. But here's what we can do: we can convince them that we love them, and we'll trade with them. And you know what? We'll give them lines of credit, because here's the thing: when they borrow more than they can pay back, they'll lop off that debt with their land. Now, where did I come up with that? This is a letter from Thomas Jefferson to William Henry Harrison, who would actually become president himself, telling him, this is how you've got to convince your merchants to run Native people into debt. I mean, you talk about the mortgage crisis of 2008? This was a strategy in 1803. And you know what? All men weren't created equal then. No, that's not the way it works. So no, I mean, to have a debate with somebody and they want to try to deny white privilege, and we can come up with example after example of what a white person never has to worry about. And I'm not just talking about hailing a cab. Look, they got these, if they got these biblical names, hey, I got one of them. John Kane, right? But if you've got one of these like standard biblical names, geez, even my last name is out of the Bible, Kane. Holy crap! I should have tried to use this white privilege more. I got the names for it, but anyway. No, I mean, you don't have to worry about if you got a name that sounds, like doesn't sound white, a native name or an African name, or a name that is, comes from, from Islam or even or Judaism. It's not so bad for Jews now, but it was pretty bad for a while. But white people never had to worry about that. If you had a name like Smith or Baker, or Harris, no, you didn't have to worry about stuff like that. In fact, if you had names like Johnson and Thomas, it wasn't a problem until all of a sudden a whole lot of black people started being called Johnson and Thomas, or Washington. Yeah, how does that happen? I'll tell you how it happens. Slavery. How do you think all these black people ended up with these white names? Because it was their masters that, you have to have a last name. Well, we were never afforded a last name. We were slaves. Same thing happened with Native people. They just drew last names. Sometimes they doubled up the first name with the last name. That's how we end up with names like John is a last name here. There was actually, again, I don't want to pick on anybody, but there's actually somebody called Johnny John. That was a name, and that's just white people writing this stuff down. I mean, we didn't use words like that, names like that. Most of our names were in the language, but because white people couldn't say it, we're gonna call you something else, and that's what wipes out a bunch of. It's crazy right now. Even on Facebook, if you have a name like a native name, even if it's a native name that's like English, like I don't know. Iron Eyes, for instance, Chase Iron Eyes. There's an example. If you got a name that's a translation and it translates to something like that, And so that's now being used as your given name. Facebook has problems, right? No, you got to prove that it's a real name somehow. So unless you've got an English sounding name, you can't even get past the Facebook algorithms to set up an account. I mean, this is again, white people never have that problem. Little piece of white privilege right there. No, white people never have that problem. And of course, you think we were talking. I did a racial equity conversation at one of the local radio stations, TV stations, and somebody brought up a great point about how it's not just that you have a concentration. I mean, the segregation is real, and it may not be mandated by law like it used to be at one time, but now the institutions that stop people from being able to move. So the mobility issue keeps black people trapped in an area. Now, this isn't a problem for Native people because many of us want to stay on our own lands. But when you're talking about economically depressed areas of a city and black people get stuck there, the flip side to that is not only do you end up with these areas that have a high concentration of very poor black people, but then you take a place like Lancaster, New York, that has this incredible concentration of white people. And in fact, it's almost, Polish and Italian. I mean, very, not a whole lot of diversity even amongst the white people there. So you have, we're 98% of the population. How does that happen? I mean, how do you end up, how do some affluent black people not make it into that? I mean, how are they kept out? Because it isn't about money. It's about how you look. And there are other ways to manipulate concentrations of where people will live. Asian, Muslim, African. Even if you're, and I say that, and they're not very accurate terms. I'm not talking about people who are from Africa. I'm just saying of African descent, or perhaps have an Arab background. So Muslim isn't even accurate. Indian ancestry. Doesn't matter if you be born in the country, though. Born and raised in the United States, even a couple of generations. But if you got that look, and if you got that name, that kind of gives it away, you're not going to live in a place like Lancaster. So this is, so people want to deny that white privilege exists. I mean, and of course you could look at everything like income, a wealth distribution. I mean, all of that stuff. And it's clear that white privilege exists. And I'll tell you, if you're a poor white person, it wasn't because you were white that you're poor. You got some other problems going on because you already had the leg up. You won the race lottery. Because the whole system, from the Doctrine of Discovery to the Declaration of Independence to the Constitution to all of these, this international, human rights issues, it was all about protecting you. Yeah, we pulled some of it out and said, wait a second, these words don't say white people. No, they never said white people. They just meant white people. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we'll take a break here with a little bit of song. I'll catch my breath a little bit. This is a good one. This is again my buddy Murray Porter, and this is "Someday I'll Never Learn" because that's kind of the way it goes.
Everybody never got one in return. I feel alone in the middle of the night, but I ain't no fool. My mama raised me right, but I know, baby, I know you ain't treating me right.
All right, we'll come back. Come back on that note. There, someday I'll never learn, and that's kind of the way it goes, you know. I mean, there's a lot of that, and man, I tell you, Native people are really just full of it. I gotta tell you, because we don't learn. I mean, every time and of course, I talk a lot about whether Native people should vote and the things that we need to do, to really kind of address issues, that we should want to address. We still, not only do we struggle with our own identity, but even within the so-called leadership in a Native community or the legal counsel of a Native community, you can't get straight answers. I mean, a simple question is, we're broadcasting from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. Can I get a straight answer, an official straight answer from the Seneca Nation or Seneca Nation's legal counsel, whether is this land part of New York State? Is it part of the United States? That's a question that people kind of hedge about. They don't even want to even take it on. See, the assumption is that it is. And of course, that ties into everything from voter registration to getting a ticket on the highway or, some federal funding, maybe some state funding, all kinds of stuff. So the question ends up being, look, do you want to take a strong stance on something like that? Not knowing that it could have, maybe some, it could cost you something? Forget about the benefits of such a thing. That's not even where we go. Look, I just saw, a friend of mine just posted an article on some state media site talking about whether the state should equalize taxation on gaming so that native casinos are paying the same tax rate that non-native casinos are paying. I mean, completely ignoring the fact that the state can't tax native gaming. But see, there's that revenue sharing thing that the state has turned into a tax, by practice. They won't call it that, but that's not, the media is calling it a tax. The media is saying, no, native casinos should pay the same tax rate that the non-native casinos are paying. Or the non-native casinos should pay the lesser tax rate to match with the taxes. And they keep saying that word taxes. They're not saying revenue sharing, because revenue sharing is voluntary. I mean, it's an agreement. Okay, no, we're gonna share with you. But if it's mandated, then that's not sharing. That's skimming. That's taking. And in this situation, because it's not legal to tax native gaming, it's extortion. Because it's saying you do this or else. And of course, they won't really come right out and say it. It's always loaded. And of course, the newspapers all get it right. Well, the New York State won't approve a gaming compact. They'll shut them down. The loaded part of all that stuff. Again, this is the racial divide, right? I did a show, maybe a month ago, where I said, look, if you refuse to recognize me as a distinct people, that I'm not a New Yorker, that I'm not an American, unless I want to be. But if you refuse to recognize that, that's racist too. Your failure and refusal to have enough respect for me to choose my identity based on who I am, based on my history, a history that far predates yours. Yeah, that's racist too. Hey, look, I don't want to get into it too quickly. Before I thank my sponsors, I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. I want to thank Eric White at ERW Enterprises. I want to thank my good friends at Native Wholesale Supply and Grand River Enterprises for supporting the show. It is how we do this. It is how we have this conversation. Because I'll tell you, I know the last show that I did talking about the real details of genocide. Most people use a word like that. They'll use words like sovereignty and genocide and not really know what they mean. White privilege is another one. So to talk about this week in this way is so people understand how white privilege came to be, because it was written into law even without ever saying white. But it was obvious, because you can't say all men are created equal if some men can enslave another. Or if it's legal to kill a person based on the color of their skin, whether it's a bounty or not. I mean, keep in mind, when we talk about the slaughter of Native people, it wasn't just the massacre at Wounded Knee or Sand Creek or the Moravian massacre or whatever else. It was bounties that were paid for people. People just kill an Indian, you get paid. That's what they said. But there was also this whole idea that if a Native person didn't stay confined to a specific area designated almost like a prison camp, a reservation, if they were off the reservation, you could regard them as a hostile, and a hostile could be killed. So it was legal to kill Native people. And you know what? Even when you get past the point where, like the era of lynching black people, Native people have been lynched too. If you don't prosecute the murder of people, it may not be that murder is legal, but it kind of is. It's kind of legal if nobody ever gets prosecuted. That's why we have missing and murdered Indigenous women. The reason that's a problem isn't just because white men have sexualized Native women to the point where, where they think that women can just be taken, raped and murdered, left on the side of the road. But no, there's no consequence for it. There's no investigation for it. We get into sometimes a lot of the conversation about suicide. Even those numbers are tough, because do you know how often the death of a Native woman gets listed as suicide, even if it wasn't, or it may not have been? Why? Once you listed a suicide, case closed. You don't have to worry about, you can just say that she took her own life. I mean, it's happened time and time again to people that I know. So, yeah. I mean, this is again part of the conversation that needs to be had. And of course, the other thing that comes up is, okay, but what do you do about the past? So, people talk about reparations. When I hear a white person say, well, black people don't need reparations, look at Oprah. Oprah? You think because one woman a black woman got wealthy, that solves the problem? Mitch McConnell literally said that the election of Barack Obama for 2 terms constituted reparations for black people. He said that. And of course, if you make that argument, then you could say the same thing about, a couple of Native people getting elected into Congress. And I'm not just talking about Howland and Davids. I mean, there have been people Native people who jump ship. They become a part of that system. Most of them don't do a damn thing to help Native people. And some, kind of put, look, Ben Nyhorse Campbell, yeah, he'd throw on a headdress and everything when it came to, we're going to open up a museum. Oh, yeah, we'll do the ribbon cutting. He'll throw a headdress on and everything. But you know what? He got into, when he ran for Congress, he was a Democrat, switched sides, became a Republican, and as a senator, he was a Republican. Now, I'm not saying that the Democrats are good and the Republicans are bad. It's not that simple, because racism spans, those spectrums. And there's no question about that. Look, we got a governor who's a Democrat who's about as racist as they come as far as Native people are concerned. Yeah, I know he can. He can talk a good streak about equity and that kind of stuff. But look, when you hear some of the comments that he's made, Mayor of Niagara Falls, the one who's going out the door, after the election on Tuesday. Democrat, racist as hell. It doesn't matter that, the party. I mean, and again, let's be clear. That the whole thing about Obama being, the good president? Dakota Access Pipeline was built under his watch. Yeah. So, I mean, and there's plenty of examples of Democrats who have had terrible policies towards Native people or people of color in general. So, yeah, don't give me the whole Democrats are good and Republicans are bad. I mean, Republicans are bad, and the ones that the current crop of Republicans, they are the worst. And part of what makes them the worst is the system. Even any of those Republicans who would like to speak out against Trump can't, because they're so afraid they can't get elected. Because people run for office to run for office. That's the way the system works. And there's an awful lot of money. It's not their salary. There's an awful lot of money that comes from being in office. I mean, look at Mitch McConnell's wealth, how much it's increased since he's been in the Senate. So, I mean, you just have to talk about some of that stuff. I mean, but yeah, this idea that a Native person or a black person who shows some success is proof that there's equality now. Oh, come on. It's not even close. Hey, I got to mention something else here before I run out of time. Yesterday, the reason we're doing a show here on Sunday night, because Sunday night's not our night, Saturday night is because last night I was at the Native American Music Awards. And I'm going to flat out say it. My wife looked stunning. She was absolutely beautiful, and it was, look, I understand the whole dressing up thing. People can get, they can criticize that just like anything else. No, we weren't wearing regalia. We were, she was wearing a kind of a formal nightgown, evening gown, and I was wearing, a black suit. So, but sometimes it just feels good to show like we can't be outdone. and my wife wasn't outdone by anybody. She looked great last night. So I got to say that. Hey, and out of the names, I got a chance to meet the band members for Portugal the Man, and I was impressed with these guys. If you don't know who they are, check them out. One of the things that they do when they perform, wherever they perform, they go through an incredible effort to locate the people who are indigenous to an area. So no matter whether it's Alaska, whether it's the Southwest, whether it's the Southeast, no matter where they go, they try to find, well, who are the indigenous people here? Even if they're not here anymore, they'll try to find somebody. And whether that they can get some dance or music, song, speaking, poetry, whatever. They begin their show by advancing the indigeneity of the people from an area first. And I might work with these guys a little bit. We had a bit of an exchange, and I want to thank Amy Spark for connecting us up. And so yeah, I think there's some potential there to do something, kind of interesting, kind of neat. Look, I enjoy going to the Native American Music Awards, but I'll tell you, one of the things that is on just an amazingly clear display is assimilation. And look, I understand people believe different things and that kind of stuff, but when you get somebody on a stage, singing a song or doing a spoken word piece, and they want to try to just put Native spirituality and Christianity together. So they'll go on there with their crosses hanging around their neck, and they're saying, "Oh, we need to consult our elders, our spiritual elders." No, who are you talking about? Priest? You're not up there advancing Native culture. You both had crosses hanging around your necks. And that's not, look, these people clearly haven't talked to, the only elders they talk to are Christian elders. And I'm not trying to condemn that. But that's what gets on such, it becomes so much on display. So much about prayer. And look, I know a lot of Native people say, "Well, yeah, we pray." Well, I don't know that we did. I think that was an indoctrination. There are things that we did demonstrate for our young people why respect and thanksgiving. We did those kinds of things. But the idea of hands and knees, or on knees, hands folded, praying to the Creator. I mean, as Haudenosaunee, I know how many people say that. But when we talk about even the right-handed twin and the left-handed twin, that's not the Creator. I mean, even when we use an expression like Sequoia Disu, he who created, it didn't mean that he was a creator of all. He wasn't God in the white sense of the word, but that's what we did. I mean, when we bury people, we've become so indoctrinated into the Christian way of viewing spirituality. Oh, they're taking their journey to the Creator. Well, maybe some native cultures viewed it that way. But Haudenosaunee, no, they return to their mother. I mean, that's literally what we do. We return our loved one to their mother. There's no part of our funeral service that talks about our people crossing over to the sky world. There's nothing in our funeral service that talks about returning to the sky. No, it's returning to our mother. But that's what's happened. And I see that sometimes it's just on such blatant display. And not just at something like the NAMIs. And I'm not picking on the NAMIs. I mean, look, I've gone and I've spoken at conferences, and when they open these conferences, they'll get some holy roller up there giving an opening prayer, not the Ohunda Gurdi Wadekwa, not the Ganuno, not an acknowledgement or a Thanksgiving address. Oh no, Lordy Jesus, Lordy Jesus, Lordy Jesus. I mean, a native conference, a group of native people talking about something that's important to us. And we got to listen to 10 or 15 minutes of Lordy Jesus? I mean, when you get up in the morning, if that's what you believe, pray before you come. But we shouldn't have to be inundated with that stuff. I mean, because, sometimes I feel like I want to respond to it, which would be really inappropriate, right? It's not inappropriate to have that stuff shoved down your face. But it damn sure would be inappropriate if we responded to it. So I don't know. And of course, I don't. The whole veteran thing is another issue, and that gets on full display. I mean, look, Wes Studi was honored at the Native American Music Awards last night, and of course he received an Oscar. I mean, he's done a lot of good movies, and he plays. He played, almost every native. I mean, they give a list of all the different native peoples that he played: Paiute, Mohawk, Cherokee, Apache, Navajo, right down the list. And look, he's been in a lot of movies, and it's noteworthy. And he is the most accomplished native actor ever. I mean, and I think that's pretty undeniable. But I don't know what the hell he did in the Army. I mean, that's not why he's up on the stage, because he was in the military. And we got to start this, and that's glorification of war. Look, today is the 3rd day of November. So and I don't want to say traditionally, but this month oftentimes gets designated by the President of the United States as National Native American Heritage Month. I haven't heard those words out of Donald Trump. I did hear him try to dedicate this month towards veterans. Of course, Veterans Day comes up in the month of November as well. I think next week or something like that. So, again, most of the U.S. holidays, in one shape or in one form or another, are the celebration of war. I don't know how a people evolve and get to a higher level of humanness if they're forever glorifying war. And shame on us for doing it. Because we're not even glorifying our people who fought for us. We get consumed with glorifying our people who fought for them. The same armies that killed our people. The same system of military system that literally slaughtered our people and misused our people when they enlisted. Yeah, I know everyone wants to hype up the code talkers, but look, they were trying to kill our language until they could weaponize it. But and again, I'm not trying to necessarily attach this or blame the Namis for this, but it just seems like as Native people, we almost can't go anywhere without having a religion imposed upon us. This military service thing. I mean, are there any powwows left that are not somehow a veterans powwow? I mean, I just asked a question. I don't know. I mean, I gotta assume there's some. I mean, I know there are festivals like the green corn that the Pequots do, and there are festivals that we do, but the ones they get labeled powwows, and I'll tell you, even those, who are the first ones they bring down when they do their grand entry? Veterans, guys who served, and not warriors. Not Native people who fought for their own people to defend their territories, push back against the state or the federal government. No, they never get pushed on the front line. No, only the guys who wore a U.S. uniform or Canadian uniform. And again, I don't want to be consumed by all that. I mean, there's so much going on. We're into the nutty part of, the American election system. The Canadians just finished theirs, and we get pulled into and sucked into all of that. I get into a debate with people about unity. Look, the idea of us standing with each other as we fight for things as Native peoples, absolutely, I agree with that 100%. But we don't need to become homogenized. We don't need to become the pan-Indian thing that Hollywood's tried to do to us, or in some cases we try to do to ourselves. No, every territory needs to prioritize what they need. And we should all help each other attain those needs. And when I say attain, I don't mean lobby Congress to give us something. I don't want a damn thing from Congress. I don't want a damn thing from Deborah Haaland, or Sharice David, or Donald Trump. Or Governor Cuomo or any of these state legislators. No, I don't want anything from them other than to be left alone. Stop taking from us. I don't need a piece of federal legislation to fix my life or to fix the lives of our people on any one of our territories. Now, we get into this debate over money all the time. And of course, all of that money has some sort of strings attached to it. Correct. There was a program that the Seneca Nation had applied for some program, summer program, and in order for an 18-year-old male to participate in this summer youth program, they had to provide proof that they had registered for the draft. Now, I'll give the Seneca Nation credit; they pulled it. They said, "No, we're not advocating that." But having said that, it is still difficult to find any Native territory, the leadership in any Native territory, that will come up with a definitive and clear-cut answer to every Native youth who approaches 18 years old. They won't come and say, not only do you not have to register for the draft, I mean, they certainly will never prohibit it, which I think, I don't know, people have different opinions about that stuff, but they won't even discourage it. This gets back to the same, why do we have identity problems? Because this white privilege thing is so important that people of color oftentimes try to see if they can't, let me just tap into it a little bit. I mean, why do we sign up for their religions? Did we really? I mean, honest. I mean, do we really believe all that crap? I mean, Noah, the ark, really? walking on water, bread and fish. I mean, come on. If you heard that about anybody else's culture, you'd go, bullshit. Right? But no matter how absurd the stories of the Bible are, including the origins of the planet, it's got to be it's true. Not like any native creation story, which can be dismissed and out of hand. Look, our identity is for us to decide, and our identity should be framed about understanding who we are. I mean, it isn't just about rejecting Christianity or rejecting state or federal or military or any of that. It's not just about rejecting that stuff. It's because how do you reject that stuff if you don't even have enough of your own identity to hang on to? We should understand that it is a privilege, not white privilege, native privilege. What does that mean? And this isn't about whites. This is about supremacy. This is about native supremacy. But I refuse to push to be an American U.S. citizen with just some special native rights. No, I'm not interested. Not interested. And shame on anybody who is. We should be proud of who we are, and we should fight for the benefits that we should be able to create for ourselves. Fight for the right to create benefits, not ask for benefits, not ask for things. I don't need legislation. I don't need funding. I don't need any of that stuff. Just we can make our own. Look, the Seneca Nation had to pay $1 billion in New York State for bullshit. That's $1 billion that they'd have. No, I'm sorry, $1.5 billion that they'd have. They gave out more money than they received. And you know what? I'm not even saying that the state and federal government owe us. This isn't just about reparations. This is about language that was involved with cession of land. We're still paying a toll as we go on the goddamn thruway. Never should have had to do that. Never. We pay tolls to cross a bridge sometimes, even international bridges. Native people have never surrendered our right to travel, to pass on our ancestral lands. Now, I can't speak for what white people have given up, because you still get white privilege. And we know where it comes from. Every goddamn document that was ever drafted for the United States was for white people. Written by white people, written for white people. That's the origins of white privilege. So anyway, that's our show for the night. I want to talk about it. I just want people to understand. So again, I want to thank you guys for listening and for being a part of the show. And we'll go out with another Merge Quarter song. Thanks. Yeah.
Talk to somebody, let them know. Talk to your friends, let your feelings